Spoiler warning for the 4.7 Traveler Quest Bedtime Story. Hey Lore Sauce, Roosevelt here. Are your memories real? I mean, you're sure you remember them, right? Well, once again, the story is drenching us in memory alteration shenanigans. And we learn more about the Loom of Fate, which has everything to do with memory and weaving ley lines. And it's all pointing back to one of the very first lines from Dainsleif.
Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave.
But before I get to that, let's do a little recap and talk about flowers and seeds.
We're gonna plant a few little seeds in this minefield and see if we can grow some fake memories.
So, we get a commission to find a missing person in Vamara Village, and immediately it's sus because no one can fully remember who this missing person is. Like, not even his name, just his kindness and his impact that he had on them. A few other things make travelers suspect this missing person may have never existed, and/or has memory alteration powers. Dane shows up because the Abyss Order seems to be in town, and he drops a lot of lore that needs its own dedicated video. The next day, Dane wakes up and he's like, "Man, the weirdest memory appeared in my mind, where I gave the eye of the first field tiller to that missing person you described." This is basically a trap to make Dane go check on the eye of the first field tiller and reveal its location. So we enter Dane's hideout, with Dane pausing weirdly beforehand. That's a plot-relevant detail. Later, Traveler escapes the trap, while Dane confronts the sibling. Traveler exits back to Vamara Village, where the once agitated Hilichurls are now peaceful. The missing person case doesn't exist, and they can also hear a mysterious voice telling some sort of story. We deduce we are in someone's memory from before the missing person case, based on the wacky ley line anomalies, and also because time seems to be standing still at dusk. See, Atosa mentioned that she only saw this missing person at sunset. So we garner this is because if time is moving, a fake memory might conflict with real memories. So this is Atosa's memory where we meet someone who looks familiar. It's none other than Caribert Alberich himself. He spirits us away to his realm of consciousness where he explains everything. Caribert never existed like this. He died long ago, his life merely a sacrifice for the Loom of Fate, and his consciousness only now lingers. Also, Dane meant to give us the eye of the first field tiller before entering the fake hideout, but Caribert had implanted a memory in Dane that he already had, so he never did hand it over. Thus his weird pause before entering the hideout. This essentially delivered the eye to the Abyss Order, completing the Loom of Fate. Caribert explains that the Loom of Fate can weave ley lines. In its basic form, it can only create and implant memories. This is where Caribert got his power. But as it gets stronger, the Loom of Fate can truly weave ley lines, and can no longer simply affect memories. So Caribert had implanted memories in the villagers so he could somehow live out the peaceful life he was robbed of. Although he viewed this as selfish, he ultimately left a very positive impact in their memories. And the only reason his consciousness survived for so long was his personal goal for completing the Loom of Fate. His one wish was to give a memory of a bedtime story to the Hilichurls to comfort them in their ineffable agony. Just like how Clothar once comforted Caribert with the fairy tale of being a little monster. Caribert truly was a kind and gentle soul despite all his suffering. We don't deserve him! And then, as Caribert disappears, there is that scene. We finally speak with our sibling. They don't quite know how to use the Loom of Fate to its full potential, but seek to do so before the heavenly principles awaken. Here, the sibling confirms that they are not only asleep, but must be in bad shape to ignore the destruction of a divine throne. The sibling explains that their feelings towards the heavenly principles are contemptuous but also complicated. Now, I want to explore this tail end of the conversation a bit when Traveler asks why they can't continue their journey together. The sibling reminds Traveler that during their journeys across the stars, Traveler always wanted to find a place in the universe with a specific flower in full bloom. This flower is the Intevat. And at the conclusion of the siblings' journey in Teyvat, the sibling came across the Sea of Flowers at the end. Would you call this a coincidence, they ask. Well, according to Dainsleif, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Traveler seems to pick up on the meaning, but I'm left with some questions. So let's step back and examine Inteyvat. It's the flower in Lumine's hair and the national flower of Conria. Dainsleif says that Inteyvats are a symbol of a wanderer from home and the tenderness of the homeland, because if taken from Conria, they harden, and upon returning, they turn soft and finally turn to dust. Interestingly, these flowers are also brought up in the Narcissan Kreutz Adventure Team quest. Marianne asks Traveler about flowers from their homeland, and Traveler describes Inteyvats. These all previously spurred discussion at the time that perhaps the siblings are actually originally from Teyvat. And for the record, I'm not even going to try and fit this idea into the history and timeline of Teyvat, because there's a lot of pieces not quite piecing for me yet. So, speculation, but perhaps they can't continue their journey together because this was once their home, and now it's been fundamentally changed. And this may be directly related to the siblings' complicated feelings towards the heavenly principles. Also, consider this. The character introductions by the mysterious KK present another perspective about the siblings' home. According to their intro for Lumine, their homeworld had been destroyed. This is also implied in the Sword of Dissension as well. Now, there's a bigger aspect of this that bothers me. As a Descender, Traveler is immune to Irminsul changes, but he loses his memory when Caribert's realm of consciousness shatters. So it seems Traveler is still technically susceptible to memory alterations, just not with Irminsul. And I can't help but be bothered by this one line regarding how the sibling is not a Descender. See, despite remembering Rukkhadevata when everyone else clearly didn't, the Traveler still later questioned if something was wrong with their memories. Now, I realize that there's more context given surrounding this with the following interlude, but also consider this. In the Wings of Dissension, it reads, "You do not truly remember who it was who had treated the two of you ever so gently. You wish you could remember." This super reminds me of how the villagers remembered Caribert's kindness, but not his name or who he was. So I think there are a few ways all this could go. One is that the journey wasn't just adventuring, but had a purpose that's now forgotten. A purpose related to their home. Alternatively, there's something about all this that makes me question the veracity of this journeying amongst the stars. Think of it this way. The sibling seeing the Sea of Flowers is not a coincidence, and to me, it reads like a dream manifested. And I'm personally a little bit suspicious of the fact that we only know a few bits and pieces of this journeying amongst the stars. This may be crack, but I am indeed wondering if this traveling amongst the stars maybe never happened. Whatever the case, the sibling seeing the Sea of Flowers at the end of their journey is pointing to some greater revelation. Honestly, I'm thinking out loud at this point, so I'll leave that speculation hanging. Now I want to go back to the Loom of Fate and what it can do at full capacity, and why the sibling doesn't know how to use it yet. The Loom of Fate in its most primitive form can create and implant memories. For example, Caribert was able to use this power to trick Dane into obtaining the Eye of the First Field Tiller. Here, the memory had a functional use. But memories are just memories, right? It's no coincidence that Traveler repeatedly brings up Rukkhadevata in this quest. Rukkhadevata was able to completely memory wipe herself from Irminsul. Of course, she didn't change the course of history. Other memories just filled in the gaps. Wanderer effectively did this as well. Caribert explains, though, that the Loom of Fate has greater potential. As more of it is completed, its power becomes stronger and stronger, until finally it has the power to weave real ley lines of its own. Caribert admits he can't predict the implications of this power and what the Abyss Order plans to do. But consider that the quest really goes to great length to separate memories from real existence. Like how Caribert, as we saw him, never really existed. He was just a memory. So the difference between memory and weaving ley lines is that of realness. And we can infer then that the ultimate goal here is making memory real. I want to explore this with a particular scene from the quest, with the disclaimer that there's some creative thinking involved here. In the realm of consciousness, Caribert is explaining how he tricked Dane by implanting a memory. We see a flashback to the moment of Dane's hesitation, exactly when it happened. Now, I'll be blunt. This doesn't exactly feel like a flashback to me, because we see Caribert raise his hand towards Dane to create the memory. I mean, sure, maybe this was just for dramatic effect, but we do have a precedent of time working differently in domains and realms of consciousness and such. And I can't help but feel like in this realm of consciousness, he was able to see a specific moment in time and act on it. And I feel like that's extra possible given Caribert has some of Vedrfolnir's juiced up abyss power, and Vedrfolnir can transcend time and space, so. But I bring all this up because it reminded me of another very specific scene. A scene in which we're in a realm of consciousness and act upon a moment of time in the past. I'm talking about a second story quest where we're in Makoto's realm of consciousness. With the assistance of a higher power, Istaroth, A plants the seed of the sacred Sakura 500 years ago. Obviously, the circumstances and results are very different, planting a fake memory versus planting a seed that grows. But I think this reveals exactly what Caribert meant about the Loom of Fate's power. At its most primitive, it can only create memories. At its most complete, it can weave ley lines. And now, I think this is what Istaroth does, picking moments in time to weave the ley lines. I also think it's no coincidence that the word Kairos, another name for Istaroth, also denotes the moment in which the shuttle could be passed through the threads of a loom. So the Loom of Fate should be able to do what Istaroth does. To further support a functional parallel here, consider this. It seems odd that we randomly end up with this photo of our sibling with Caribert from his realm of consciousness. The photo description says it transcended the rules. And this, I think, was actually Caribert's last act. And it was a small way of him making a memory actually real, using the completed Loom of Fate. This real photograph of a memory would be his way of trying to let Traveler remember what happened. So, this is all to say, the difference between Caribert implanting fake memories and creating a real photograph is the same difference between Rukkhadevata's erasure and the sacred Sakura tree's growth. It's altering memories versus actually changing reality. So, let's now tie some loose strings together about why the Abyss Order can't use the Loom of Fate to its full potential. This next section is highly speculative and contingent upon previous speculation, but let's get creative. The Loom of Fate can weave ley lines, maybe similar to how Istaroth is able to. Yet the Loom of Fate seems entirely independent of Irminsul. Like, I don't even recall Irminsul being mentioned at all in the quest. As a quick refresher, the ley lines are a network connecting the world, and they carry elemental energy and memories, with Irminsul as the big repository for memory. So, while the Loom of Fate can manipulate the wires, it's distinct from the databank. The sibling says that they still don't know how to utilize the loom to its full potential, and I think it has to do with all the themes Fontaine has been giving us. Since the end of the Sumeru patches, there have been persistent themes of will. We first learned that Kavarna and Abyssal Energy both have a will that enables them to rewrite the rules, and it makes them a higher order than regular elemental energy. This concept of will is particularly important when it comes to Descenders, because Renee of Narcissenkreuz points out that not all Outlanders are Descenders, because Descenders specifically have a will that can rival a world. So I think the key thing here is that the sibling is not a Descender. The sibling is not only recorded in Irminsul or the databank, but also lacks the will to rival a world. And perhaps that's why they don't know how to utilize the Loom of Fate to its full potential. So conversely, this would mean that operating the Loom of Fate at its full capacity requires a will that can rival a world, one who isn't subject to Irminsul. Now we can finally get back to what I teased at the very beginning. In the Travails trailer, Dainsleif says that the threads of fate will be yours to reweave. And as for what Dainsleif means by that, at its most basic, it simply means that weaving the ley lines is reserved for the traveler, the Descender. So I think that covers my general thoughts about the overarching plot and themes and narratives of the quest. But there's one final and most important question I need to talk about here. Where's Kaeya? No, seriously, for the past 20 million videos, people have pointed out that I, the Kaeyaspiracy theorist, have not mentioned Kaeya in a hot minute. So let's fix that. We were given a lot of new Khaenri'ah names in this quest, which again deserve their own dedicated video, but there's also a lack of direct connections to our existing knowledge of Khaenri'ah. For example, the names and factions in Parenheri, whose legitimacy is maybe debatable, but also their connections to the dynasties, King Irmin, or even Schwanenritter. I'm particularly interested in Schwanenritter here because they were the ones to fight against the Abyss during the Cataclysm, meaning they would have been in direct opposition to the Five Sinners. Moreover, it's highly insinuated that the leader of Schwanenritter, Enfortis, himself was an Alberich because he took over as regent when the king became indisposed. So, as far as the Alberichs go, we have Clothar, the founder of the Abyss Order, and his son Caribert. But we're unsure of how either Enfortis or Kaeya fit into the family tree. This quest more or less confirms that Kaeya isn't directly descended from Clothar himself. I was certainly struck by the first scene where we met Caribert, though. He looks familiar. Now, Traveler was probably talking about Clothar, but they certainly added a lot of details to remind us of Kaeya. The dark bluish hair, the single blue earring on his left side, the soft and handsome face, you get the idea. But there may be an interesting detail here. Caribert was a half-blood, his mother was from Mondstadt. In his appearance here, his eyes are nearly identical to Clothar's. This struck me as strange because many of us figured Kaeya's eyes were slightly different because many assume he's a half-blood descendant. Now, you may say, but Ruse, Caribert's appearance was literally created basically in Clothar's image, literally. But the thing is, Caribert remembered what his dad looked like, right? So I would think that he would also remember what his eyes looked like as an 8-year-old child, and that, presumably, wouldn't have changed. Now, perhaps I'm leaning into this Kaeya conspiracy theorist role here. However, I think it would be super interesting if this were a small detail very intentionally left to suggest that Kaeya has unique Khaenri'ah eyes. And frankly, no, I'm not going to accept any descendant way far down argument because that is too boring for me and for Kaeya. Alternatively, I would like to imagine something like, I don't know, just imagine it's hinting at something else, like a pontal mark. Okay, I'm stopping myself, I'm getting too lost in the sauce, I know that's crack. I digress. I actually have a ton of legitimate thoughts about Kaeya. I've noticed that many people are remembering Kaeya's line about the sinners being the only thing left of Khaenri'ah. But I must remind you, as someone with near encyclopedic knowledge of every voice line that Kaeya has ever said in-game, that everything Kaeya says is important. Like, for example, in the first Caribert quest, Paimon directly asks Kaeya if he's involved with the Abyss Order, and Kaeya gives the biggest non-answer in history. And, in his hangout, Kaeya basically alluded to the heavenly principles being an inept god who writes fate, and that inept is too civil of a word. Here, I'm sensing a hint of just a little bit of contempt for someone like the heavenly principles. That is, a cruel and inept god who plays with the lives of those under them, and they call this cruelty and ineptitude fate. Honestly, there's too much here that I have to say about Kaeya, especially with regards to Khaenri'ah and the Abyss Order and the Heavenly Principles and fate. So, consider this a deranged mini preview for next time. This is Kaeya Impact after all. Well, that's all I have for now. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to have some more videos soon focusing on other aspects of the quest that I just completely ignored. But trust me, I've had the Sinner on my mind since basically a year ago or so, and now we know that's Dane's older brother who's also Vedrfolnir, and now I have more Sinners to obsess over. So, please like, comment, and subscribe, share your own theories in the comments. I hope you're all doing well, and make sure to check your smoke detector batteries. Okay, bye.